We got new bearings and they're perfect. So let me show them to you right now. Okay, I took this bearing here. This had just a little bit of tarnish on it. And what did I do with it? Okay, I've got gray Scotch-Brite. This is used Scotch-Brite, so it's less abrasive than normal gray Scotch-Brite would be. And I went through there and very carefully wiped this bearing in line with how the bearing is going to be in the engine and the travel of the crank, and cleaned that tarnish out of there. So the tarnish won't hurt you. In the last video I was trying to explain the tarnish that looked like a percentage mark. I could actually feel it and scrape my fingers on it. So that's why I opted to replace those bearings. And then the other section of that, the other half of the bearing, it actually had pits in there, like it was delaminated and had disappeared, lost to the ages. So this is what we're going to do now. Of course, I'll clean this first, make sure we get any traces of abrasive or anything out of there. But I just wanted to show you that. And let me show you how these look before I clean them. This is the bearing as it came out of the box. There's nothing wrong with these, they've just been sitting on the shelf. I wanted to reiterate that Midwest Military went above and beyond, and they sent me these. I got them Sunday, and they didn't complain about it or anything like that. They didn't give me a hard time. They went above and beyond to help me out with this and get me the right parts. This is why I love buying stuff from them over any other military supplier. Even though this isn't a military vehicle, they still carry stuff like that. So if you need things like this, buy them from them. So I will show you how I clean these on camera. I'll try and do this so you can see it. And yes, I'm going to do it over the engine, but we are bagged, so don't freak out. This is just so you can see it. I'm going to set these other bearings off to the side so I don't knock them over. This is a little difficult for me to see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to take this and just gently wipe that a few times. Until all that oxidation is gone. Alright, so this is after I've cleaned that just a little bit, very lightly. Now keep in mind, you're going to have just a little bit of the abrasive left in there, so you do need to clean these. I always clean it with lacquer thinner, but you can clean it with something else. And you could use brake cleaner or something that's going to evaporate, but it doesn't hurt them. And this actually is going to hold more oil too. You're taking off just the lightest bit of corrosion on here. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, and then we're going to start fitting bearings into the block. Finally! And we'll show you how to use the plastic gauge. Some people don't like it. Some people swear by it. I've had pretty good luck with it. I have heard some horror stories where it's not been accurate. But one of the things you can gauge that by is if you put the crank in and you can't turn that crank over reasonably easy without the pistons in, then you might want to double check that. Bolt your caps up with the bearings in there, tighten it down in 3 steps to torque it, you know, the whole routine, and then measure that with an inside telescoping gauge and then measure the crank. Maybe you've got the wrong bearings. I've heard of that happening before. We know we're 30 under on these. It says it right on the back. This is an entire sealed power box of them, and it says on the box 30. Alright guys, we're down to the last 2 bearings, and I wanted to show you why I'm doing this. This is why, because look, there's a little bit of crud in here. Now this one I've very gently cleaned. I'm telling you, there's not enough in there that's going to make any measurable difference. But it will clean that up and ensure that that bearing surface is deoxidized and that there's nothing contaminating the surface or sticking up that's going to gouge into your crank. This one, this box is just a little bit open or something. Something has gotten onto this and I can feel it. And I'm going to clean this, and that will help to remove that. Alright, as you can see, that was able to remove that stuff that was stuck onto that babbitt. So There's no more junk on there. You can see a little witness mark, but I can't feel it. And we'll wash all these down like I said before. So I'm going to go ahead and put these away, and we'll clean those and then unbag this motor, and we'll get on with it. Alright guys, we're back on it, and as you can see, those bearings are nice and clean, and we're going to rinse those real quick. That's why you clean them, right there. And make sure your one that has the oil hole in it goes up inside the block. That's an easy mistake to make if you're not paying attention. Alright, so next we're going to double check that the crank is clean. I'm sure I cleaned that, but I'm going to rinse it out again with brake cleaner off camera. Then I'm going to grab that and we're going to gently set it down in here. We're going to snap our bearing caps into the main caps and put some plastic gauge in and go through and tighten these up in 3 passes. And that way we make sure those caps sit down evenly and you don't get them stuck and break something. It's very easy to do. That was nice. I just dropped and smashed my finger. Alright, let's get our plastic gauge put on here. Can be a little difficult, especially with gloves. Doesn't have to be perfect. Number 1 and number 4 cap on this engine are pretty unique, so it's pretty easy not to get those two confused. Where you run into problems is the center ones. So you got to be real careful to look. See how that's got 2 punch marks? And that one's got 3 actually. And then compare these. It's 2 punch marks, and this little mark here is your front. Okay, there we go. These get hung up in here sometimes. They're pretty tight fit. So our final goal for these caps is 85 foot-pounds. I'm going to 50 on here, and just going to lightly go through all these, torque them down in 3 stages. Alright, we're going to take these off now and check our plastic gauge. Alright, I've seen a million ways to take these caps off. One thing I like to do is gently take an extension like that and then just bump them. I think that's a pretty risk-free way of doing that. You're pushing towards the center, so you're not going to break off the edge of this. I don't like sitting there hammering them. I mean, I have had to use a mallet in the past, but I found this method works a lot better. Okay, so we're about 15 10,000ths. I don't know if you can see that. That's where it should be. Right on the money at 15 10,000ths. Right on the money at 15. Okay, so the next thing to do is clean off all that plastic gauge, and then I'm going to go ahead and lift that crank out, and I'm going to put on the bottom portion of the rear main seal because it's a bolt-on type, and it's a lot easier to put it on when the crank is. And then I'll put a little bit of assembly lube on that lip of the seal to make sure that we're not tear that seal up. This is where I got my finger caught, right in there. Alright, I'll put just a little bit of oil resistant RTV on both sides, and we're going to get these screws lined up through here. Just pop this on. Alright, that's in finger tight. So the book wants us to leave these seals, this seal loose until the crank is fitted in there and the cap is tightened down. So what we're going to do next is just smear a little bit of assembly lube through here. Try to avoid getting in the oil hole, just, you know, so we don't have a problem with that pushing past when it's first oiling. Alright, now we should be good to set the crank in. Try not to get my finger caught in there again. Okay. Yeah, that feels silky smooth. This is done. Now we've got to go back through here and add a little bit of silicone. I usually use aircraft sealant here because it doesn't dry up. But we'll put some sealant here so that this can't leak past and start causing a problem. And I also need to get the seal installed on the upper bearing cap. So let me do that, I'll bring you back. Alright guys, so I've got these little end caps in here and just a smidge of aircraft sealant on here. You don't want to put too much on there if you don't want to change your clearance with that cap clamping down, but you want to make sure that this whole thing seals together. So that's our main purpose in this. And of course we've got our assembly lube in here. Just going to gently set that on there. You can see that's not quite seated. Right, I caught a little boo-boo. I don't know what I was doing here. I didn't even put the seal on here. I'm looking at this going, why does that look strange? Durr. So I got the seal put back on here. We're going to retorque this main cap. And I kept thinking that looked funny. I could have swore I did that, and I started double checking, and nope. Would have noticed it when I come up with extra parts, huh? Alright, moment of truth. Oh man. Look at that. That crank is butter smooth. Very nice. I think I like this assembly lube a lot better than that other stuff. This is really nice. That just feels perfect. So we've double checked everything, tightened all our main caps down, you know, and everything's rolling really nicely. Shouldn't have anything to worry about there. Alright, so that went pretty well other than my little boo-boo with the seal, and you know, it helps to actually install the seal. I guess I set it down in that box, and I'd seen it in there, and I saw one of the old halves in there, and I thought, why would we got a neoprene seal with a rope style? And well, it's because you didn't put it on, dummy. But it's on now, it's fixed, and everything's good to go. So next we're going to go on to fitting the pistons, rods, rings, caps, all that stuff, and we'll have to plastic gauge all of those times 6. Probably isn't strictly necessary, but we're doing it anyway just to make dead sure that everything's correct. We're not going to have a problem.